He couldn't believe a big girl like this has never known a man before. Janet sat by the window, her gaze fixed on the rain as it fell steadily outside. Each droplet ran down the glass like the memories that she couldn't escape, even if she tried. The sky was heavy, and so was her heart. She had lived a life that she thought was full, but it had always felt empty. Now, as she sat in this quiet room, the silence was deafening. Janet had always been a big girl, not just in size but in heart. She was the kind of person who loved deeply, who cared for others in ways that often left her feeling tired, but still hopeful. And yet, when it came to love, it always seemed like the world didn't understand her. She had never been loved the way she had wanted, never been held the way she needed. There had been a few fleeting moments of affection, but none of them had ever lasted. She had given so much of herself, but the love she craved was always just out of reach. Harrison, on the other hand, was the kind of man who had lived a life of quiet solitude. He had known pain, too, but it was a different kind of pain. He had loved before, but love had betrayed him. His marriage had ended, and he found himself alone. He had built walls around his heart, walls that kept him from feeling too much, from opening up to the possibility of being hurt again. He had seen Janet from afar, noticed the sadness in her eyes, and he had wondered why someone like her, someone who seemed so full of warmth, had never found a love that matched the size of her heart. It was on a day when the rain fell like this that Harrison finally approached her. Janet had been sitting in the small cafe where she worked, serving coffee and chatting with the regulars, when he had walked in. His eyes met hers, and for the first time in a long while, something stirred within her. He had asked for a cup of coffee, and they had exchanged small pleasantries. But it wasn't just the conversation that made her notice him. It was something in his gaze, something in the way he looked at her as if he could see through the walls she had built around herself. Over the next few weeks, Harrison came to the cafe more often, each time sitting at the same table by the window, watching the rain with a quiet sadness in his eyes. Janet would bring him his coffee, and they would exchange a few words. It wasn't much, but it was enough for her to begin to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: connection. One afternoon, when the cafe was unusually empty, Harrison stayed longer than usual. As Janet cleared some tables, he called her over. There was a sadness in his voice that made her pause, her heart tightening in her chest. "Janet," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I don't know how to say this, but I have to ask you something." She felt a lump form in her throat, not knowing what to expect. "What is it, Harrison?" He hesitated for a moment, his hands fidgeting with the cup in front of him. "I've been thinking about something. And I know it might sound strange, but I just can't stop wondering. How is it that a woman like you, a big-hearted, beautiful woman like you, has never known love the way you deserve?" Janet's breath caught in her throat, and her heart skipped a beat. She felt a rush of emotions flood over her: embarrassment, confusion, and a deep, aching pain that she had buried for so long. She looked at him, his eyes searching hers for answers. She began, her voice trembling. "I don't know. I've tried. I've given so much of myself, but it always feels like I'm too much. Too big, too loud, too much to handle." Harrison's expression softened. "I don't think you're too much at all. I think you're just the right amount of everything. But sometimes, people don't know how to love someone like you. They don't know how to embrace all that you are." Her eyes welled up with tears. "But it hurts, Harrison. It hurts so much. I've given my heart to people who didn't deserve it. I've tried to love, to be loved, but it always ends in disappointment. I don't even know if I can believe in it anymore." He stood up, walking over to her. Without saying another word, he gently took her hand in his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world outside seemed to disappear, and all that mattered was the quiet, tender touch between them. "Janet," Harrison said, his voice low and comforting. "Love isn't always easy, but it's real. And sometimes, it takes time for the right person to come along. Maybe you haven't found it yet, but that doesn't mean it's not out there. And it doesn't mean you're not worth it. You are, more than you know." She swallowed hard, trying to fight back the tears. "But I've been waiting for so long, Harrison. I don't know how much more I can take." "I understand," he said, his voice filled with empathy. "But you don't have to wait alone anymore. I'm here. And I promise, I'm not going anywhere." In that moment, Janet felt something shift within her. She had spent so many years running from love, hiding behind the walls she had built around herself. But now, with Harrison standing there, holding her hand, she felt the possibility of something different, something beautiful, something real. As the days passed, their connection deepened. Harrison never rushed her. He never pushed her to be something she wasn't. Instead, he patiently showed her that love wasn't about perfection, it was about acceptance, about embracing each other's flaws and imperfections. It was about finding beauty in the broken pieces and building something stronger from them. Janet had always believed that love was something she needed to earn, something that had to be won. But Harrison showed her that love wasn't about earning or proving anything. It was simply about being there, about sharing moments of tenderness, about letting go of the past and embracing the future. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of her small apartment, the rain gently tapping against the roof, Janet turned to him, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and vulnerability. "You're right," she said softly. "I've been holding on to so much pain, so many past hurts. But now I'm starting to believe that love isn't something I have to chase. It's something I can hold in my hands." Harrison smiled, his eyes tender. "And I'll be here, Janet. Right here, with you. No matter what." Janet leaned into him, her heart racing as she felt the warmth of his embrace. It wasn't just the physical closeness that made her feel safe, it was the emotional comfort that wrapped around her like a blanket. The understanding that she didn't have to hide anymore, that she didn't have to be afraid of being too much. As they sat there in the quiet of the night, Janet realized that love had always been a reflection of herself, her ability to give, to sacrifice, to care. And in Harrison, she had finally found someone who could mirror that love back to her, someone who would hold her through the pains of the past and walk with her into a future filled with hope. She couldn't believe it, not at first. A big girl like her, who had never known a man in the way she dreamed of, could find love like this. But as Harrison's arms wrapped around her, as he whispered words of comfort and understanding, Janet knew that love wasn't about the past or the mistakes she had made. It was about the present, about the embrace of someone who saw her for all she was and loved her anyway. In that embrace, she found something she had longed for her entire life, acceptance. And in that moment, she knew that love was worth waiting for, even if it took a lifetime.